My name's Dave Duncan, the Marine Operations Manager for the Port of Nelson. I'm also the Harbour Master for the Port of Nelson, working with Port Nelson and Nelson City Council, and I'm one of the pilots here. As the Marine Operations Manager, I'm responsible for assisting the management and operation of around about 8 million tonnes of gross registered tonnage of shipping coming through the port, and that can consist of just over 1,000 piloted ships and just over 1,000 non-piloted ships that come through, being fishing vessels and smaller vessels and the like. Okay, see you later. We have 2 full-time pilots and we have a contract relief pilot, and we will manage at any time of the day, 24 hours, 7 days a week, the vessels that require a pilot to come in and out.
Hello, Samantha in charge. Hello, Dave. Can't stay away.
So there's no wind to speak of. Flood tide will take us away from the berth and away from there. So we just have to.
Looking good.
Yep. Conditions are working for us. High water's at 10:45. 3.2 metre rain, so it's a moderate tide. What does the pilot do? Well, the pilot will primarily check the weather and tide before he joins the ship. He'll prepare a passage plan for the vessel, either coming in or coming out. The pilot's normally on board a vessel departing about 15 minutes to half an hour before it departs, and just monitors the preparation of the vessel, ensuring the engines are all good, the resources on the vessel are all working proper working order, and if there is any issue, he may be able to resolve those with the master or make a decision whether they use one or an extra tug to assist the vessel on its way. Starboard 15. Thank you. We have the advantage of a fairly reliable soft bottom most of the port, and with our regular surveying and dredging operation, we're pretty confident the channels are pretty clear. Our maximum size vessel for Port Nelson is 225 metres. We will increase that on exception and on a case-by-case basis.
I'm Pete Hoff, and my title is Launch Master. I'm in charge of the maintenance and the running of the pilot launch, and just do the day-to-day jobs, taking the pilot out to the ships, bringing them off the ships, crew changes to vessels that anchor out in the bay, search and rescue. The vessel's going to be at the pilot station out in the bay there at a certain time. We're called half an hour earlier, and we'll come down, we'll pick up the pilot and take him out, put him on the boat, on the ship, bring him back, and then come back in and just make sure that the harbour is clear of enough boats. Quite often on a Wednesday night, you have the Wednesday night races, the yacht races. They start at 6 o'clock at night, and of course that's can be a bit of a handful when you've got 30 or 40 yachts milling around in the harbour and you've got a large vessel trying to come in.
My name's Andy Farmer. I'm the Terminal Operations Supervisor at Port Nelson. I'm ultimately responsible for the container terminal. Any cargo that's in a shipping container sort of falls into my field of expertise. I have a team of people, some gatehouse yard sort of function admin side of things, and I've got a team of drivers out in the yard. The terminal is sort of split in half for an empty depot, which is all about processing empty containers, and the export side of the terminal, which is all the full exports leaving. So we've got a range of machinery and personnel to cover all those aspects. My main tasks are really coordinating some day-to-day activities in the container terminal and making sure that Containers are available for people to come and pick up empty, so they can then fill them for export to make the required vessels. There's a whole host of things that has to go on in order to pick up an empty container, fill it and export it. It sounds pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of interaction between a number of port logistics staff to make that happen.
This is a Jade system we use. We've got these lines of codes as the containers coming in, and they show up on this screen with the data of the voyage they're going out on, discharge port, and we're just simply matching them up over on this screen, keeping all the cargo together to make loading the vessel easier.
So these containers would have come off the vessel a couple of days ago, and Barney will be laying them down for a survey just to check for any transit damage, holes, structural repairs before they carry on their way for wash and pre-trip. Gary will check them inside and out to make sure that they're all structurally sound and suitable to go to the exporter for packing. If you knew something's come from the Pacific Islands, you'd be giving them a very good once over as far as all those biosecurity issues go. Refrigerated containers on power. Within 20 minutes or so of them all getting unloaded off the truck. This container here has a set point of -20 and it's currently sitting at -19.9, so that would be deemed to be right on. This will get checked every morning and every afternoon until it gets loaded onto a vessel to exit Nelson. That stack of MSC containers there will be loaded containers which will go out on tomorrow's vessel. They're in Albanola. If we pan a bit further along to the Hapag Lloyd reefers, a bit further down the stack, and the Maersk reefers down the other end, they would have all been empties that have come off vessels in the last few days. A reefer container is a refrigerated container. The reefers you see too high, they'll be full ready for export. So we've got 2 wash pads, basically rows of 8, so we can lay down 32 containers at a time. And then this whole pad has to get washed down on a daily basis. All the drains have baskets where to catch all the product, put it in a special MAF approved bin, and MAF keep a pretty good eye on what's going on here. See these ones with red crosses on them? That means that it needs some form of machinery repair or refrigeration repair. So it could be awaiting parts, it might be being quoted and needs approval from the shipping line to say go ahead and fix it. We've got all these empty tanks here. Most of them are going to head to Marlborough, get filled with wine and come back for export. And the other major way to export wine is in bulk, which is the flexi tanks, which you'll probably see being fitted out at Keepack. All the documentation for this container leaving New Zealand records the container number and the seal number. So on the other side of the world, when they get their goods, they can check their original paperwork and make sure it's still got the original seal on it to make sure that it hasn't been opened somewhere in transit. You can't open this container door without cutting that seal. I guess when the public drive down past Rocks Road and they saw these stacks of containers at Port Nelson, they start wondering what's in all those boxes. The truth of it is most of them are sitting there empty, ready to be filled to go out as export units. Nelson's predominantly an export port, therefore that every container that goes out of here, basically an empty, has to come in to fill that booking. We're not like a lot of other ports that have a lot of imports, and then the containers would get unloaded, come back as an empty to get refilled to go out. We're very much a one-to-one empties and fulls out type situation. So certainly at peak times of the year, December to February, sort of pre-apple season, you'll see a lot of refrigerated 40-foot containers being stacked up, and that's all in preparation for the fruit season. We'll have several thousand containers go out of here of apples.
My name's Craig Callaghan. I'm the planner for the port company, the ship's planner. We look after all the load and discharges for the container vessels that come to the port, as in we take the boxes off that need to come off in Nelson for the different customers, and we design the load plans to go onto the ship to enable the different discharge ports and stability of the vessel, and commodity-based planning, which is then printed out in paperwork for the stevedores, which they follow the actual plan that we do here. What starts the process is we get a file for the ship, every container that's on board, container number, where they are. We put it into our database, which then creates this actual bay plan of the ship. So that's basically what the file tells us, and as you can see with the different colours, New Plymouth in our case happens to be pink, crimson, and these green boxes here are Nelson. Now we've got these boxes here are Tauranga boxes. Now we have to take these off tonight to get the underdeck stow out. So they're what we call as restows. We'll discharge them onto the wharf, and then when we finish we put them back on board this vessel after we've loaded in these bays. In this case the vessel is going to discharge 150 and it's loading approximately 290 with 18 restows. So it's a reasonable exchange. It's 570 this trip. We have vessels, the biggest we've had is about 1,200, 1,300. We average about 20 moves an hour per crane, so this vessel will take approximately 2 12-hour shifts we're hoping to do it. With different commodities you have different rules, as in regards to you can't have kiwi fruit and apple together, because kiwi fruit actually puts apples off if they're in the same underdeck bays. Just because of the toxicity in a kiwi fruit. We've got different wines that have to go under deck because they go off in the sun if they're on the top deck for too long. There's Fonterra, any Fonterra products aren't allowed to be placed near any heatable sources, as in fuel tanks that are kept warm or the engine rooms, and can't load on deck. And then we also have different lots of timber that some of it has to have the doors open and tied back so that it doesn't go mouldy before it gets to China. So they go in separate areas. And then you have hazardous as well, which you have to place down the bow end of the ship so that if it explodes, it just takes the bow off it instead of taking the wheelhouse out.
Mark Smith, Logistics Supervisor of Port Nelson. One of my main roles is looking after KeyPack, which is a customer service that we do for our customers locally. We pack and unpack timber products. We receive MDF from Nelson Pine 20 hours a day to keep the trucks off the road over the peak times. So we work from 5:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, then we start again at 7:30 at night through to 5:30 in the morning. We pack and unpack about 700 containers a month, and it's got a staff of 5. We're loading LVL into a container, which is another product from Nelson Pine. One forklift driver will put it in the container and the other guy will push it in. This product's been made up inside the shed. You've got to make sure it's under 12 metres because the container is 12 metres. So they normally put a 6 metre and a 4 metre inside, or 5 metre inside the container. So he size shifts it in enough for the next guy to come in with his bunter. And that's how a container of LVL is loaded. This is a transitional facility, which is a restricted area. This is a high risk area. This is Les Gill, our quarantine foreman, that has been looking after quarantine and works closely with Customs and MAF.
It is one of the personal effects. Customs had it on hold because they wanted to examine 190 odd boxes, because the people never put in what actually were in those boxes. So they got to go through and make sure there's no medication, no drugs or dangerous knives and swords. Also another 45 items over there for MAF to inspect, which could hold contamination because of push bikes, barbecues, vacuum cleaners. Outdoor wooden furniture there is full of termites and boron, which is going to go down to a fumigation container and get fumigated to kill all the contaminations on that table.
Name is Charles Osmond, stevedoring manager for Port Nelson. I work for a company called Tasman Bay Stevedoring, which is part of Port Nelson, and we load and unload ships. We do containers, break bulk, logs, salt, gypsum, cars, anything we can lay our hands on. We deal with agents, ships agents, who look after the ships. So they'll ring us and tell us what time the ship's coming in. So for example, it's coming in Tuesday at lunchtime. We generally get notice a week ahead. So a couple of days out we'll start planning what we've got to do, because we don't get one ship at a time. Sometimes we can have 3 or 4 going, and some ships in Nelson, some ships in Picton going at the same time. Logistical nightmare. We can never man up for the amount of work that we've got, because we can't have a couple of hundred staff here and only give them a couple of jobs a month, because we do have our peaks and troughs with the different seasons. So once we get a call from the agent, the ship will keep changing as the days go on, from different days to different times. Generally the day beforehand, if we can get away with it, we try and get as much information as we can, confirmed information. Then we start planning the labour and what we need equipment-wise, and whether we need to move this here or personnel there, or etc., etc. And that can happen right up to the point 6-7 hours before a ship comes in. We try and do it as early as possible so we don't muck anyone round, but ships' timing changes pretty much right up until they come in. You can spend hours and hours and hours planning something, and with one phone call it could all change. It's quite hard on staff because you don't actually have a set time. You could be working at 2 o'clock in the morning, next minute you get a phone call and the ships come forward, so hence you have to be slightly nuts to do the job. Yeah. So the guys get paid accordingly. It's quite an interesting sort of profession because it requires people to have a certain skill set to actually be able to do the job. You need to be able to, a fairly decent crane driver, sitting that far off the ground with a reach that far away, trying to land a container on 4 little pins. It takes a sort of knack, a special knack. There's a certain amount of swing that you've got to catch on the cranes. It's quite an intense sort of job. I've had a couple of goes up there, and yeah, you can sort of understand what the guys are going through. Yeah, it's not the sort of job that if someone decides to leave the company for whatever reason, that you can just go down the road and hire someone. We've got to have the training in place to make sure that we future-proof TBS.
I'm Craig Terrace. I'm the workshop supervisor at Port Nelson. We've got 16 staff in the workshop across a variety of trades. We have mechanics, electricians, engineering staff, general hands and administration staff here. Some of our staff also double as tug and pilot launch deck hands. We're responsible for all of the maintenance of Port Nelson's assets from the ground up. That's electrical supplies, water, buildings, mobile plant, including light vehicles, trucks, our 2 tugs, 3 harbour mobile cranes, a pilot launch, a variety of navigation beacons out in the harbour. We do work with the data and security camera network, large forklifts through to container handlers. Essentially everything that's maintenance related to do with Port Nelson's assets, the responsibility for their correct ongoing function rests with the workshop.
My name is Bill Holman. I'm the Security Manager, Supervisor for Port Nelson and Port Facility Security Officer, along with Cam on my right hand side, who is my deputy. Our prime function here is to ensure access control to this port, as we are an ISPS compliant port. Therefore we have to ensure our facility is safe, and we do this by a number of ways: by access control, which is a Gallagher Command Centre access control system, and by with the help of 40 odd cameras that we have scattered around the port.
My name's Andy Wills. I'm the Harbour Master at Cornwall Slipway there in Nelson there. Basically there we are a sea rail. We pull boats from anything from 100 tonnes to 2,500 tonnes there. The slipway capable of an aft draft of 6 metres and 13 metre beam on the boats there. When we first get contact from a boat owner, if the boat hasn't been to Nelson before, we need a set of lines drawings, and Naval Architect does us a docking plan which gives us a block layout and dimensions where we build the blocks and start setting up the cradle. So when the boat's here, it can come straight onto the cradle there, and the divers go down and check to make sure the boat's situated in the right place, and we're not actually going to sit down on anodes, C-suctions or any other appendages on the hull that may have been added afterwards or through other dockings and other places there.
My name is Sarah Archer. I'm the Operations Manager here at C3 Nelson at the port. I report directly to the branch manager. C3 is a log marshalling company, and we are contracted by log exporters to measure their logs, unload them from the log trucks and store them on site in readiness for when the ships come in, and then we load them onto the ships. We are contracted to bring the logs shipside, which is right beside the wharf. That's our only, as far as the ship loading process is concerned. We are told what logs to bring to go on what part of the ship, and we bring the logs shipside. And then the stevedores, it's their responsibility to zap, with scanners. They use our technology for scanners to scan every log, and they need to put it in the ship itself, knowing that it'll go to a certain wharf or a certain barge over in China and Korea.
My name's Digby Kinniston. I'm the Port Logistics Manager here at Port Nelson, and I'm part of the executive team. So the executive team is a 5-person team. 4 of us report into Martin Burness, the CEO. And my role as Logistics Manager covers most of the operational aspects of the port. Part of being in a leadership role is to develop the people here so that you can get the best out of your staff. And I think they're coming on very, very strongly there. We empower them with a lot of responsibility, and they rise to the challenge. And they're the ones that really do have the best local knowledge. They've got an industry expertise. They know their job very, very well. And we encourage relationships throughout the entire workforce that are very strong, very committed, that people get along well, people know what is required of them. We're always testing to see whether we are, the way that we do things, we're doing them the best way. We question ourselves. There's always room for improvement, and we are embarked solidly on a continuous improvement program, which we're thoroughly committed to. And we benchmark ourselves against other ports, we gauge ourselves, we get customer feedback, we use employee feedback. There's a number of areas in which we continuously look at ourselves to see if we're doing it in the best way. I think it's really the people here that make the operation that it is. They're very can-do people that really like to face challenges and solve problems and make things happen for other people.
My name is Martin Byrne. I'm the Chief Executive here at Port Nelson, a position I've held since January 2004. I've worked in the maritime sector my whole career since leaving college, originally with Union Maritime Services, which was part of the old Union Shipping Company of New Zealand. And then I worked overseas in Western Australia, Fiji and South Australia before coming back to Nelson. We're 50% owned by Nelson City Council and 50% by Tasman District Council. So the shareholders' expectation from us are regular and consistent returns, and probably the single biggest way that the average ratepayer would see that would be in terms of keeping rates down. And as an example, an average dividend we pay per year would make a difference of about 4% to the NCC rates. We're very much about trying to facilitate trade through the region. Obviously, being a smaller regional area, it can be difficult for exporters. We don't have the volume of some of the larger ports. So we see ourselves very much as providing a facility that the exporters of the region can get their cargo to the customers around the world. And trying to do that in a way where it's cost effective for them, but whereby we're also making a good return. The major focus we have long term is utilisation of assets and getting the best we can out of what we've got. So what we're trying to do is handle increased volumes of cargo if we can over the wharves we've got. So we've moved into added value services like container packing, we're looking at warehousing and storage, that sort of thing. Our stevedoring staff have done some work out port and other ports. So again, trying to give our staff more work if we can, particularly the guys that are casual or on PPT, what we call permanent part-time contracts. And anything to do with port development is very expensive. The moment you build wharves over the water, the construction costs just escalate significantly. So again, trying to put off any major capital expenditure where we can and trying to make use of what we've got is probably the major focus.